All right, so we are now live. So I just wanted to say welcome to everyone and thanks for joining us today. I know it's a really busy time for all of us, but thank you for spending an hour with Amanda and myself today. So for those who haven't met me at a bookkeeping conference or a XeroCon or some other bookkeeping random event, my name is Stacey and I run Healthy Business Finances. So a bookkeeping practice. I'm also an accountant, but I don't do tax. So I kind of delve in the middle there, and we do a lot of management accounting and reporting and financial coaching. So over the past probably 6 weeks, it's been a really interesting time for bookkeepers and accountants, and a lot of people are really stressed. We're really busy. We're impacted by clients who are stressed and busy and trying to manage to hold on to their business. And I thought it was a really nice way to reach out to the bookkeeping and accounting community and just give everyone an hour to talk about the mental health aspect of everything that's going on with coronavirus. I've seen the impact of our clients closing down, having to make staff redundant, and the financial people in their life are the people they pick up the phone to and have that first conversation to, which can be really draining and it can be really emotional. And most times as finance professionals, we're not taught very well to deal with that side of running a business. We're taught to deal with the numbers. So I'm super excited that Amanda can join us today. And I'm going to give a little intro to Amanda and I'm going to read the paragraph because numbers are my jam. Definitely psychology is not my jam. So Dr. Amanda is a doctor of clinical psychology and founder of Mindworx Psychology, an award-winning private practice in Sydney with a whole team of child and adult psychologists helping others. She's also the founder of Think Differently, where Mindworx Psychology is focused on helping diagnose, assess and treat mental health. Think Differently was founded to help people who are already high functioning increase their emotional intelligence. That's right, people who are already fabulous, like everyone on the webinar today, but who can still benefit from practical strategies and skills to take them to the next level. Amanda runs both corporate programs and online coaching, working with everyone from new mums to business owners to Olympians looking for a mental edge to take the gold medal. So thanks so much, Amanda, for joining us. I am going to hand over to you. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions as we go along, feel free to pop them into the chat box down the bottom of the webinar. You can try the Q&A box, but I did do a test run earlier today and it wasn't playing fair. So if the Q&A box does not work, please pop them in the chat and I will fire them at Amanda as we go through her presentation.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm really excited to be here as well. So numbers are definitely not my gig. But mental health is my gig and I love helping people with their well-being. So prior to COVID, mental health was something that I looked after anyway. Even as a psychologist and even as someone who has a focus on preventative mental health and doing really well, I've struggled during COVID. I'm a small business owner myself and I've been found twice in the last 2 months crying in my office. And I have never done that before, ever. And I've been in business for 6 years. So for me to lie crying on the floor of my office shows that mental health for every single person is a really important thing. We've all been affected, not just by fears of the virus, but as business owners, often we've been affected financially as well. Our families are under stress and many people are trying to homeschool at the same time as navigate everything that's going on. So I know that Stacey's been having lots and lots of people who are emotionally distressed. And at our practice, we've also been working with lots of people who are struggling as well. So today what I thought I'd do is show you how to tell if you're struggling. And then, because you might not know that you are, and then also give you some tips as to how to help yourself as well. Yeah, does that sound okay?
That sounds perfect. And I just want to jump in that if anybody has any questions and they don't want to post them publicly, you can try and post them in the Q&A direct to me. And I'm happy to ask them to Amanda if you don't want your name associated with the question.
Yeah, there is a Q&A section. So I've opened it. So I'll see some questions come in if you ask as well. And feel free to interrupt me and ask any questions that you want. I'm more than happy to get interrupted as we go. So I'm going to start just by sharing my screen. so that I can share some slides with you. So Stacey will give me a nod just so I'm sure that you guys can see that. Perfect. All right. So mental well-being during COVID-19, you know, we need to take it seriously at all times, but I think this year it's going to be a long year. You know, there's a lot of articles going around just now that we're in the third quarter of isolation, and that's a psychology term. And it talks about the research that's been done on people who go to space or people who go to strange places where they're isolated, and the effects that isolation has on us all. And they're actually quite severe. And the longer it goes on, the more severe it is too. And one of the really interesting things in that research is that the length of time you expect to be isolated has a really big impact. So it's not necessarily how long you are isolated, but how long you think this is going to last. Because at the beginning, if you thought it was going to last maybe a month or two, you're probably ready for this being quarter three, where you're doing it tough and you think you're about to come out the other end. Whereas if you thought this was going to go for 18 months, you're probably still in your first quarter of isolation effects. And it really does make a difference for your mental health. So it's not isolation itself or challenges itself, it's always what we think that makes a really big difference. So what does that look like during COVID? Well, it looks like recognizing the signs of mental ill health. And when I'm presenting to different groups, I usually break it down like this. There's emotional changes, behavioral changes, physical, and then cognitive changes. So cognitive changes are the way that you think, and that changes when you're stressed. And there's also some really nice strategies that we'll talk about as we get through to the end of today's session. So what does it look like for most of the people that I'm working with in terms of what's going on for COVID? Well, it looks a little bit like this. I've made a list to see if it's the same for you. First of all, if you've got your children at home, or maybe you've got a partner and they're working from home, or perhaps you're trying to work from home, well, never mind finding the space to set up all of those laptops and find the bandwidth on your Wi-Fi to do all of that. But there's the attention demands from being in the same space as all of those people. There's the time demands, and there's trying to just juggle all of the different things that need to go on. And that's a problem because it's almost physically impossible. And most of us are going to be homeschooling for a while. You're probably getting lost in what we call the noise. There's just a lot going on. Or maybe your children are getting lost in the noise as you try to juggle multiple different things. At work, you're probably noticing that there's rapid changes. You know, for a lot of us, the extent of change has slowed down a little bit. You know, for me as a psychologist, I think there was 3 legislation changes in around about a fortnight. And that was a time when I was lying on the floor crying. I just had to update everything every night. And it felt overwhelming and like it would never stop. And as we open back up, we're probably going to have to go back through more rapid change and more uncertainty as well. There's new and evolving processes. I'm sure that you're having to write them. The government this afternoon was talking about, you know, WorkSafe website and how they've put up a lot of information for businesses to make sure we understand how to work safely. So there's a lot of new processes being written across Australia. There's changes to our teams. Some of you might have let some of your staff go. Some of you might have had to cut hours. There's a lot of changes going on in businesses right now. And there's also the really interesting dynamics in trying to lead a remote team. So some of you might have already led a remote team, and that is great, but you might not have led a team who's not only remote working, but they're also trying to homeschool as they work for you too. That's really quite different.
Amanda, we've had quite a few questions around the remote learning and remote teams. And people don't seem to have an issue with people working from home, but it has brought up an issue working from home with all the competing priorities. So it's almost flipped the conversation into what was once a positive thing. People could work from home and have a lot of flexibility, to now it being a negative thing. Do you have anything around that we can rephrase that negative connotation with that concept?
Yeah, well, look, I've actually written quite a few articles recently on homeschooling, and one of my key messages is to not think that you're a teacher. you know, to understand that you're not really doing homeschooling at all. What you're doing is supervising your children because they're at home. And we are trying to continue with an academic education for our kids, and that's great. But there's two things to know. The first thing to know is that in New Zealand, when there was the earthquake and the kids didn't go to school for a long time, they did as well as if they had gone to school. In fact, they did slightly better. And that's because when they got back to school, the school focused on making sure they learned what was important. Okay, so we don't need to worry about whether our kids are actually getting enough work done, because the school really will catch them back up, and they might not learn everything they would have learned if COVID hadn't happened, but they'll learn the things that they need to, and you need to trust in the education system to get our kids back on track. And the second thing that's really helpful is for me as a psychologist, I want you to think about a kid. I want you to think about a classroom of 20 or 30 children. Now, it doesn't matter what age they are, but if they're in kindergarten, then probably 25 of those children during the English lesson are staring out the window. They've got an attention span of around about 5 minutes. And some of them will get a worksheet. In fact, they'll all get the worksheet. Some of them will doodle on it. Some will attempt to finish it. And some of them will finish it and ask the teacher for more work. There's such a range of what goes on in a class. You know, by the time your kids are in high school, maybe not 25 out of 30 are staring out of a window by then, but still in every class, kids are staring out of windows. Also, people are cracking jokes. You know, kids are getting up and down to get their work. Teachers are talking to people. They're not concentrating for as long as you think. So if you get an hour's worth of work from the school and you get 10 minutes of focused attention from your kids, that's probably as good as what a teacher did. In fact, it might be better. All right.
Perfect.
So
thank you.
I really hope that helps, because I notice that most of the parents I'm working with, they're putting themselves under incredible stress to do 6 hours of teaching. And that's not what your kids do at school anyway. Okay. So try and just let go of that pressure. Remember that New Zealand did okay and they didn't homeschool at all. And remember that your kids, they're getting intensive tutoring from you, not homeschooling. Okay. And if it helps, just remember that my kids are abandoned because I don't work from home. I go to the office. And so I just leave them to it and mostly the game. And I'm okay with that. Okay. So they'll definitely beat mine if yours are doing 10 minutes of work. So there's the self. You know, what does that look like? That's where you feel guilty. Guilty because you went out to work and let your kids stay home and game instead of doing their schoolwork, or just guilty that you're not managing everything because you've got really high expectations. And if you're a small business owner, you probably do have high expectations because you're the kind of person who sets the bar high and then opens up your own business and goes for it. So it's quite likely right now you've never been in this situation of trying to juggle so many different things and not have the answers for them all. You might be exhausted. I know I heard Stacey talking about working really long days. We've all been working really long days. And also when people are anxious, they tend not to sleep well and they tend to let self-care go out the window. You might find that you've got really inconsistent with your self-care. I mean, I used to go to the gym most days of the week and the gym's closed. I would like to go for a run every day of the week, but you know what? It's a bit boring. I really prefer to go to the gym to my class. So I'm a bit inconsistent, and so are most people. There's also quite a bit of financial uncertainty around, and that doesn't help us to feel settled. And obviously, we're all a bit scared. You know, we're doing well in Australia right now with COVID-19, but we're all a bit scared and we don't know what's going to happen and we don't know what it will look like. So if you're doing fantastically well, then that would be a surprise. That's what I'm saying. It's always been okay to not be okay, but right now it really is quite normal to not be okay and to be struggling and trying to work it out.
Amanda, I love that you say that it's completely normal to feel that way, because in a lot of the bookkeeping and accounting groups that I'm a part of online, it's almost like we're embarrassed to mention that we have had a really shitty day, or we've had a really shitty phone call with a client, or we feel enormous pressure. And as you went down that list, I was like, guilt, exhaustion. Yeah, I'm nodding my head, because all of those things, I'm sure a lot of us have felt on a daily basis, if not an hourly basis. And I think it was really nice for you to say those things are normal, because nobody talks about them very much in our profession. We're not supposed to have emotions and feelings as accountants. It's been really interesting watching people say, you know, I hope this is okay to share. I actually had a really crap day today. And it's almost like they're apologizing by admitting that. Is that common?
Yeah. Well, look, we've just come out of 2019. I don't know about every other business owner, but you know, I started off this year by expanding my practice. So I think all of us have came, you know, in from a society where it's been quite an affluent, successful, you know, we've all felt like we could achieve anything. And really, you know, in 2019, it wouldn't have been the go to admit that you weren't doing well, because that wasn't the landscape. But, you know, it's a different world, and we're all navigating it. And I think if we're not willing to have a bit of self-compassion and also a little bit of insight into how we feel, then we can't navigate through it. So there is still a little bit of pretending that people are doing fine or that they're not affected by COVID, but I don't know that that's real, and it's not what we are seeing, not in business and not in the practice either. What we're seeing is, I'd say that exhaustion, that's the key thing, that's what we're seeing. Even my team, they're exhausted. You know, and me too, I need extra sleep. I noticed a question up there, and it said, my daughter's kinder has opened up and I'm going to send her. Imagine that you're really nervous if you're doing that, and many of her friends aren't going, but you're going to send her to help with her mental health, and you feel guilty that I'm sending her when others aren't. How do you know if you're doing the right thing? Well, this is what I'd say. You don't know if you're doing the right thing, but what's your options there? So we can all stay home. You know, I'm nervous. My kids are going back to school next week, and I'm really nervous about that too. And I'm an essential worker, and I could actually send them earlier. The only reason they don't want to go is because their friends mostly aren't there this week. For me, you know, yes, I'd like to keep my children home, lock the door and sit tight and then wait for time to go past and wait for COVID to be over. Well, that's not going to happen. And so we've all got to learn how to live with it, and we've got to do what we can, and we've got to do what feels okay. So if your GP says your child should not be going to school, I think take it seriously. But if your kid is healthy, the risks are really low. As long as your child is coming home and you are managing the risks. So, you know, I'd be taking all their stuff off at the door and giving it a bit of a wash and just making sure you've not got any cross-contamination going on in your household. And as long as there's no one at high risk in your household, I think it's okay. And I think mental health is as big a part of well-being as anything else. There's just no point sitting home safe with your children and hoping you'll be okay in a year, because you might physically be okay, but you won't mentally be okay. You know, my kids are desperate to go to school, to go and see their friends, and I think they need to. So I hope that helps. I'm not going to say I've got all the answers for COVID. We don't know if we're doing the right thing. We've got to just trust the government and the science and go day by day and see what happens, you know, but don't take risks. So if there's anyone who's high risk in your family, obviously go and talk to your GP before you decide to go to school. All right, so how to recognize if you're stressed. I really like these slides because sometimes people don't actually know that they're stressed. That sounds weird. Most of you probably think, of course I realize that I'm stressed. But sometimes we don't. So there's emotional, behavioral, physical, and thinking changes, so cognitive changes. And what it looks like is this. So when you have an emotional change, you might feel sad or hopeless. And feeling sad and hopeless is quite a normal thing to feel, but you feel it more often. So you feel it most of the day, and then it comes nearly every day as well. And that's a big deal. So maybe not if it's just every day for 2 or 3 days, but when it starts to persist for over a week, you need to take it seriously. Funnily enough, I don't work with many people with depression who are lying in corners crying or not getting out of their bed. And that's because most of the clients that I work with are incredibly high functioning. So how I usually spot that they're a high functioning depressed person is they're cranky. So they start to yell a lot and they have a short temper and they're really irritable. So they're not likely to go lie in a corner because that would be low functioning. They're much more likely to be really, really cranky people. They might also not be able to relax, might start to not go see friends, start to feel lonely and isolated and cut themselves off. Might feel guilty, touched on that earlier. Their self-esteem might start to take a bit of a hammering, and they might just stop doing things. So they just stop enjoying things they used to like. You know, maybe they liked baking on the weekend, they stopped doing that. Maybe they liked, you know, calling their friends for a chat. It's just they don't have any interest in those things anymore. So those are the emotional changes that, if you're experiencing those, we'd suggest you keep a little bit of an eye on yourself, because they're suggestive of your mental health slipping a little bit.
Amanda, just with those emotional ones, can I just jump in and ask a question? We have some people say, once I get through the next 2 weeks of busyness, everything will just be fine. So they do have some of those symptoms, and I'm guessing some of the next symptoms that you're going to go through. But because we're busy and we're probably very stressed, we start to just go, it will just be okay once I get through it. Is that just masking the problem, or is that potentially okay? Or how do we decipher whether it's just a short-term problem or whether there's something more?
Well, that's a really good question, isn't it? I mean, what's short-term stress? Excuse me. Imagine, you know, lots of you on the call, or you, Stacey, you know, you do bookkeeping and accounting. So I often think at the year end, you guys are probably really stressed. Have a few late nights and you stay up late and you just ignore it and push through and you're good. And we all do that sometimes. You know, I do that every year when it's my kid's birthday and I have to make cupcakes to take to school. I always underestimate it and I'm up all night just pushing through. That kind of short-term stress is totally okay, but you cannot do that for a long period of time. It's not helpful. So if that's the only way we've got to cope, then we're going to burn out. And burning out is really deeply unpleasant, and it takes a lot longer to get back from burning out. So recognizing we're not doing okay and actually having some good strategies to make sure we do better, that's a much more successful strategy. So during COVID, I'd say you probably want to have a little bit of both. But a lot of us have done that push through a few weeks ago, and we're done now. Like, I certainly don't have enough stamina for more late night to go with any more legislative changes. I just don't have that in me anymore. So I've got to do much more self-care, because that strategy won't always work.
Thank you.
So in terms of physical symptoms, particularly younger clients, you know, like a lot of kids that I see, they'll come in and the parents are saying, oh, my child's got really bad anxiety. And the child will say to me, no, I don't. I'm not scared of anything. So this is how we tell if children have mental health. We look at their physical symptoms. So we'll look to see, do they have headaches, upset stomachs? Are they dizzy? Do they have chest pains? You know, for adults, do they have a loss of sex drive? You know, when's the last time you're intimate with your partner? Has that gone out the window? Because that's a sign of stress. Do you have more frequent colds? That's because your immune system is going down a little bit because you're stressed. Are you gaining weight? Look, this is a slide I had before COVID, so I'm going to say if you've gained COVID weight, I think it's normal. Everyone's put on a few kilos, and that's okay. If you've got more fatigue, or if your blood pressure is high, these are physical symptoms, and they're the physical symptoms of mental health. So mental health and physical health are really closely intertwined. And if you're having a lot of these symptoms and you don't think that you're stressed, it's entirely possible that you are, and you just don't realize it, because maybe you're used to being stressed and maybe you no longer realize that you are, but your body knows that you are and it is trying to tell you. So that's quite an important slide. The next one is cognitive changes. And these are really important if you run your own business. So cognitive changes come when we're depressed, and cognitive changes come when we're anxious. So if you think about somewhere like Google and the Google campus, you know, we've all seen what the Google campus looks like, and it's incredible. Google spend a fortune on making sure they have happy staff. And they do it to prevent cognitive changes. So Google know that if they spend the money making their staff feel happy, that they will do better work. All right, so it's all based in science. So when we're not happy, then we can expect to have memory problems. That's no good if you're at work. We can expect to have impaired concentration, so we're going to make more mistakes. To have poor judgment, so we might rush our decisions or not really make great decisions that are helpful. We might be a bit overreactive, only notice the negative things. Or we might just get stuck worrying. You know, instead of problem solving, we might sit ruminating about what's gone wrong instead. Procrastinating, when you just don't start the task and it's hard to get started. You know, or just getting really indecisive, not being able to make any decisions whatsoever. They're very common things to see under stress. Recurrent thoughts of death, which I've popped down the bottom. Recurrent thoughts of death are a real sign of depression, and if you're having them, it's really important that you do seek help. In saying that, a lot of studies have shown that around about 50% of the population will seriously consider taking their own life at some point. That's a really scary stat. So we do know you need to take mental health seriously because more people die of suicide than die of car accidents. So the stats around mental health are really quite terrifying when you drill into them. If you're having occasional thoughts that you just don't want to be alive because this is all too hard, that's normal. But if you're having them every day, you start to think about how you might take your own life. That is less common and that's serious, and you need to go get some help with that stuff. All right, so that would be the important bit to take seriously.
Just on that, I've got two questions. So one in the Q&A section, which I'll get to in a minute, but just on the seriousness of this conversation. And I think a lot of people think that this will never happen to them or they won't have those feelings. But a lot of people don't have a GP that they regularly go to. They may have a local medical centre, so they see a different GP all the time. When is the point that they need to see a GP compared to a psychologist? Can you just explain that for some of us?
Yeah, well, look, I'm a clinical psychologist. So in terms of mental health, there's psychologists are registered. So we're regulated and we're registered with APRA, just like your GP. And then you also have the whole field of what's called counsellors. So what I would say is you can really go see anyone for your mental health. So if you go to a counsellor, the problem is they're not regulated, you don't know who you'll see. So they might be amazing, and that's great. So I'm really glad we've got some really great counsellors around Australia. But also they might have just done like, a 3-hour online course and think that they're a counsellor. So you need to be careful. So I would always suggest that if you are not feeling great, to go to your GP first. Okay, your GP needs to do a bit of a physical screen, because sometimes what's going on for you is not anxiety, even though you're highly anxious, and it's not depression, even though you feel suicidal. What's going on could be your thyroid, and it causes anxiety and depression. So the first protocol for me would always be go to your GP and get a physical checkup and make sure there's nothing going on. All right, it's really, really important. And when you come to see a psychologist, when you come to see me, I would also send you back to your GP if you hadn't done that anyway. Once you've done that, if the GP says there's nothing physical, they'll normally recommend that you go to see a psychologist. You could go to a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist is more like a doctor. They would give you medication for how you feel. As a psychologist, we don't prescribe anything. So some of my clients are private. They don't come via a GP, although I still send them there to go and get a health check. So you can come privately or you can come via your GP, which gives you Medicare rebates as well. And once you come see a psychologist, we do a full assessment of ourselves. And then we just talk to you about, how many sessions you might need, what you want some help with. And it's really very led by yourself. All right, so getting help, there's lots of places to go. I just think it's important to go and get the right evidence-based kind of treatment. So I'd always say start with your GP. And right now you can see a GP via telehealth, and they can write you a mental health plan, and you can use that route to see a psychologist.
Beautiful. And the second question we've got, someone's posted in the Q&A, so I'll just read it out for you. My son has started urinating. So this is from one of our mums who's also in our industry. So obviously a lot going on with her. So my son has started urinating really frequently. I took him to the doctor and they did a urine test and there's no infections, but I think it's anxiety related. I try to talk to him and ask him if he's okay or worried, and he just says he's fine. How can I get out of him what is wrong so that I can help him?
Oh, I wonder what age he is. So can you type in what age he is up there as well? If he's young, 8, okay. So if he's young, what I would suggest is, it's really hard to go to the library at the moment, but most libraries you can borrow online at the moment. For children, often you can't do what we call cognitive work, so you can't work with their thinking because they don't understand what anxiety is. Now, if you know, earlier when I was saying, the mum will say, my kid's got anxiety, and the child will say, no, I don't. I mean, kids don't even know they're scared at school when they're kicking the car doors so that mum and dad can't get them out. They'll still say, no, I'm not scared of going to school at all, as they have a meltdown. So they really just don't get what's going on up here in their head, and they don't associate that they're scared with how they're feeling. So if that's what's going on at that age and he just doesn't have the cognitive capacity to understand it, I would get a storybook. I go to the library, there's thousands of great storybooks about anxiety, and I would read it. And sometimes when you do that, the kids go, oh, that's how I feel too. If he is scared around things like coronavirus, if you think that you know why he's anxious, there's some good resources on the website from Mindworx Psychology, so you can ask Stacey and she can point you in that direction. We've got a couple of storybooks up there. The Gruffalo wrote one that we've put up onto our website about coronavirus and how to cope. And stories, so other kids talking about their anxiety, is how they recognize and then agree that that's what's going on. And that's a really nice way to lead into it. Hope that helps. Right, so coming back to this, I hope that does help. Let me know if you have any other questions with that.
And I will just pop the link to your website as well in the chat box so people can Google it later as well.
Yeah, thank you, Stacey. So coming back to that, behavioral changes, I think how you would tell if he's anxious as well, is also through behavioral changes. So you see some of those physical symptoms, and we would also just look for the behavioral stuff. That would look like being less active. Now, not necessarily, because some people, when they have anxiety, for example, are a lot more active, they're hyperactive. So you can be off, you can also, what we're looking for is a kind of change. So you go one way or other way up the curve. You might start to eat more or eat less. Changes in your sleep patterns. I will say that I've seen heaps of kids have trouble sleeping recently. They're back in their parents' beds. They're really anxious. It's a tough time for kids. They're a bit scared. They don't quite know what's going on. They don't have the brain of an adult and they can't understand it in the way that we do. And essentially, we're saying you can't go hug the people you love because it's a bit dangerous. That's really hard for kids to understand. Your kids or yourself, you might be isolated, short-tempered, procrastinating. And these are really important ones for you, not you, Stacey, but people in general, is increased use of alcohol or drugs. I can't tell you how many mums have said to me recently, so I'm up to 2 glasses of wine every single night. And look, it's a problem. So you need to be careful that you're not using things like bottles of wine to self-medicate in an attempt not to have mental health problems. If you're self-medicating, that suggests there's something going on, you need to get some help. And obviously just nervous habits like nail biting or pacing around. That's called agitation, and it's usually coming from anxiety. Okay, so recognizing the signs is really important, just knowing that you're not doing okay. So if you recognize some of these signs, I just want you to remember it's normal. The stats before COVID on anxiety was that 1 in 4 people would experience anxiety, as in clinical anxiety, some point in their lifetime. And 1 in 5 of us would have severe depression at some point in our lifetime. Now just think about that for a second. That's a quarter of the Australian population. So you're not alone if you're having that. When I did my doctoral research, I did an online program for anxiety and depression. And interestingly, the people who came in, they wouldn't have met the clinical diagnostic label, and that they still wanted to do the program. So we also know that it's not just the 1 in 4 or the 1 in 5, but it's a whole subclinical population. It's all these high functioning people who just have a few symptoms, but not enough maybe to get the label of anxiety or depression or any other mental health problem. So you can still do something even if it's mild. Okay, so things that you can do. First of all, 80% of Australians report that just believing that you can change and having desire to change are the most helpful things in terms of having a healthy lifestyle. So that's great. You don't have to have any special skills. You just have to believe that you can change. If you don't believe you can change, you need to find psychologists, because that's what we're good at, teaching you how to change. 70% of Australians as well already have some knowledge of how to be healthy. So most of us do know how to be healthy. The problem in that is that most of us don't do the things that we know when we're stressed. So we all know that we should eat well, and yet when we're stressed we tend to eat junk food. We all know that we should sleep well, but then when we're stressed, it's really tempting to stay up late watching Netflix to distract ourselves. And we all know that we should, get out there and exercise, but sometimes we just don't feel like it. So we don't do the very things that we know will help ourselves. That's quite normal. Okay. But it is important to take it seriously. So our emotional well-being, the stuff that I'm really passionate about, it's the foundation for life. It's what influences your behavior, it's what glues your relationships together with people, and it's what informs your thinking every single day. So if your emotional well-being goes out, all areas of your life will go out. And if your emotional well-being is strong, not perfect, but strong and resilient, then you have a better chance of navigating through the challenges of life, such as this year during COVID-19.
Amanda,
So
I've just got a question in Q&A, if I can jump in. So Mandy has been amazing and asked us a question and said, I have suffered anxiety for many years, which has also led to migraines. And I've been told I'm in the wrong industry, which in the bookkeeping and accounting industry, sometimes I feel that's just every day. However, I have been told to allow the anxiety to happen and work through it, but have not found this to help. Do you have a strategy for this?
Ooh, well, look, there's lots of different treatment approaches actually to the treatment of anxiety. So I'm going to say this: 8 out of 10 people, 8 out of 10 people, the stats show 8 out of 10 people who go and get treatment for anxiety will get better significantly, right? So if you haven't had good treatment, you need to start by getting some good treatment. When I say good treatment, you should start with cognitive behavioral therapy. So 10 sessions of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, can be a game changer for most people. Now in CBT, we would never ever tell you just to allow the anxiety to happen and to work through it. That's just not the treatment plan. What we would do is we would just teach you how to think differently about the anxiety, and then we'd teach you how to work through it. So we'd actually give you some strategies so you can cope, tackle it, and manage it. And there's a set specific range of things that we teach you over 6 to 8 sessions that can really make a big difference. If you haven't done that, go and do it. There are other things that you can do as well. And I'm going to have one of those later on in a few slides, so I'll run through that with you. But yeah, I would go and see a psychologist, and I would go and get some help. If you haven't done that, it can make such a big difference. I also noticed there's a comment as well, and it says, it's from the person earlier, and they've said, their son's been crying a lot more about nothing, not coping a lot more with little things. Look, I would say yes, that's really suggestive that, you know, there's emotional things happening, and they're always important to take seriously. Also, just slow down in your house. You know, if he's trying to homeschool as well, there's a lot of change. He's lost all his friends. He's probably lost all of his after school activities. He's probably eating differently because he's not taking lunch up to school and all those things. I think just slow down, give him lots of hugs and do as much fun things as you can with that kid, because he's going through a lot of change too. All right, coming back to managing your mood. The basics. So first of all, whether it's for you, your child, partner, someone that you love, you need to look for the early warning signs. So that was the slides we had earlier. So looking for those emotional, behavioral, physical, or cognitive changes and keeping an eye on them. It's okay to have them for a day or two, but if they're persisting, it's the persistence that we pay attention to. You might also want to think about what's triggering you. So are you triggered by the media? You know, I don't watch the news. It's pretty nasty. Be careful about what's in your feed, and make sure that you're turning off every single day. Make sure that you've got some really good rhythms and routines going on that can help keep you calm and help you feel reassured. Okay, so life is a little bit different. It's the same with kids. They've lost a lot of their routines. You know, some of them don't even get dressed. My son loves that. He would just not get dressed if he was allowed. But I try and get him up at the same time every day and keep him in a predictable routine, just because I know it's good for his mental health. Spend time with people you care about. That's different depending on which state you're in at the moment, whether or not you can actually do that. So be aware of the different regulations. I know it's different in each state, but this week in New South Wales, we're allowed to go visit someone else in their home. And it's been a real game changer for mental health here. So as things open back up and we're able to actually spend face-to-face time with people again, that's going to help us a lot. Eat healthy food, look, we all know that one.
Yeah, just on that one about spending time with people you care about, I know I have reached out to some of my girlfriends in the past couple of weeks and said, why don't we do a Zoom chat, like a group Zoom chat? And there's a group of us that, this is showing my age, we all live together at residential college when we're at university, and you know, we've been friends for over 20 years. And for some reason, we feel that because we're in isolation and we're busy, we simply don't have the time to catch up, because we can't go out. We can't go out for a drink or a meal or do those things. And we had a Zoom chat last week, and one of the girls lives in Jordan now. And so we had people all over, and we said, why have we not done this before now? Like, why has it taken COVID-19 for us to realize that we can catch up whenever the hell we like? Yes, it's a little bit different, but we walked away from that catch up, and you know, some of us had glasses of wine, and I had a cup of herbal tea because I'm on a health plan, and all kinds of things, and we all walked away with the biggest smile on our faces. And we didn't talk about anything in particular. We just said, how are your kids going, and how's work, and what's going on, and someone's dog was in the background, and then the budgie came in, and it just was one of those feel good moments where we thought we could do this anytime we like. But I think we forget that we can do that.
We do. And you know, I mean, the other thing is that often people don't like doing that because maybe we're not used to doing it. You know, I mean, if I go into my teenager's bedroom, you know, it wouldn't occur to her to audio call anybody. That's just not what a teen would do. So they video chat. You know, she wants to talk to her friends, they open video, and they would be on house party, and they would just talk face to face. You know, the other day I went through, she was watching, I said, oh, do you want to come watch a movie with me? And she said, no. And I was like, oh, you know, but you're just like lying here in your bedroom. And she's like, well, no, I'm not. I'm watching a movie with my friends online. and I laughed, and I thought, yeah, you're so much better at technology than me. But, you know, we're getting better too, right? So your ability to do that with your friends is probably improved. And I think it's the one good thing to come out of COVID is that we've all got a little bit more comfortable, you know, a little bit like teenagers now. We're much more comfortable catching up, and we can just jump online and see someone face to face, and it's so lovely. Yeah, so I'm hoping that will last. I mean, it's going to be an interesting research project for people to see if that actually continues after COVID, or whether people just go back to not catching up at all. I hope it stays though. So getting enough sleep. You guys know this stuff, right? I mean, I've called this slide "Managing Your Mood: The Basics." Make time to exercise. Notice your self-talk is what I'm going to talk about next. And practice relaxation. So we all know how to manage our mood, but why don't we do it? The reason we don't do it is sometimes we just don't know that we have got stressed. Or, stress is a bit like a curve. So as it comes up, we get caught up inside it, and then we just keep on going. And the further over the curve we go, the harder it is to go back and do something that's helpful. So learning where we are. So when we start to come up the stress curve, we really realize that it's happening. We recognize that we're stressed. We can see that kind of stress signature that we've got, and we interrupt, and then we go do something helpful. That's the most important thing that we can do. If we wait too long and we go over the curve, most people don't do helpful things there. They just go eat junk food and watch Netflix, and they don't usually choose to do much that's helpful at all. Okay, so I thought what I might do, I know we've talked quite a bit today, but we've got about 15 minutes left. I thought I might share a couple of my favorite tips for just managing stress and also managing as a business owner. So my first tip is called psychological flexibility. I talk often about emotional intelligence because I'm really passionate about it. But the reason why I'm really passionate about emotional intelligence is that when we get good at navigating how we feel emotionally, we also become what's called psychologically flexible. So, I mean, think of those women, some of you, or men, might do yoga. Think of those people who do yoga. I'm always really deeply envious. They're so flexible and bendy and fit and amazing looking. They look so healthy. Well, those people are really flexible physically. When you are skilled in psychological flexibility, it gives you that kind of yoga superpower in that you can just do incredible feats of strength. But instead of being physical feats of strength, they tend to be mental. And everyone's impressed by that because you cope well in a crisis, you have great problem-solving skills, and you're very, very resilient. So psychological flexibility, I have to say, that's why I focus on that and not yoga, because it's actually easier than getting the physical stuff. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is manage our internal self-talk. And our internal self-talk, the kind of chatter that goes on inside your head, it's really, really important. And the first thing I want you to know is you won't be getting rid of it. So I don't have some kind of miracle way for you to get rid of the chatter inside your head, because that electrical stuff goes on all day long. But you can choose which parts of it you're going to listen to, and you can, just like going down to a gym, strengthen the parts of the chatter that you like. Okay, so rather than getting rid of things, we'll just change our relationship and the way that we deal with them. So my first question is, what does your internal self-talk look like? When you were setting up your business, I wonder what it looked like when you were excited. And I wonder what it looks like when you're stressed. I wonder what it looked like when COVID hit. I put a couple of ideas on. These are quite common belief structures that I see when I work with people. Ideas like, I'm not good enough, I'm a failure, I can't do this, I'm a loser, I'm just not clever enough, I'm not smart enough. There's so many different thoughts that can go through our head. And most of us tend to have a few favorites that stick in there. So it's not about whether or not your thoughts are true. It's actually only about whether or not they help you. That's the only thing that matters. So we can always choose to challenge our thoughts. And we can also choose how much attention we give to our thoughts as well. All right. So those are really important things. So we might not get to choose COVID or the things that happen to us, but we can always choose what to do with the thoughts inside our head. So let's have a look at what that looks like. First of all, I want you to just think about the thoughts inside your own head. What goes through there? And what's your problem thought? For me, my problem thought is I can't stand it. That's the one that comes up for me a lot. So, you know, when I had to rewrite the policy documents for work yet again, I was thinking to myself late at night, I can't stand it. And I was getting quite emotionally agitated. And, you know, back when I became a mum and my kids used to scream and cry in the witching hour, that was the same problem thought that I had then as well. So I'd think, I can't stand this. I can't stand the noise that they make. And when they would pick up their food and throw it on the floor, I think, I can't stand that either. So I don't have a lot of problem thoughts. I just have the one, but it pops up all the time. So most people don't have 100 problem thoughts. They have 1 or 2. So what's yours?
We've actually had a lot of people, we've had a lot of people message me about this, and they're saying the same thing over and over from different people. And they're just saying, I don't think I'm cut out for this. And so I guess they're questioning probably a lot of things, but mainly whether they're meant to be a business owner for starters. They're questioning that, whether they're meant to be in the bookkeeping profession, because a lot of people have potentially taken it up as a career change and done more study and started it. And so they're kind of thinking, maybe I'm just not cut out to handle this business. Maybe that's what COVID is trying to tell me. And I hope that it's just one of those momentarily exhausted thoughts, but it's that phrase seems to be coming up quite a lot in our profession at the moment.
Yeah, my measure has probably got another thought stuck on it, something like, you know, I can't do this, or I'm not good enough. It's probably got some extra thought content sitting, but it's a good thought, isn't it? I'm not cut out for this. So let's use that as an example as we look at it. So first of all, it's a really good to just monitor your thoughts for a little bit and work out, you know, what your real problem thoughts are, rather than try to go and track down ones that you maybe only have occasionally. So we want to know what's your thoughts under stress. Okay, so I want to know what your favorite is, because there's no point working on all the little tiny ones that come up occasionally. So let's, instead of saying I can't do this, maybe someone's problem thought might be I'm not cut out for this. Well, the first thing to know is your thoughts are not facts. I mean, I might like to think that I'm the Queen of England, but given that I'm Scottish and I don't have a crown, I'm obviously not. So it doesn't really matter how often I want to tell myself that I'm the Queen of England. It doesn't matter how much I think it. It doesn't matter, you know, if I think it all day long, it will never be true. All right. So it doesn't really matter what you think. It doesn't make your thoughts true. So thoughts are not always facts. When you look in the mirror and you think you're ugly, it's not necessarily true. And when you look in the mirror and you think you're having a good hair day, that's not always true as well. So your thoughts are not always facts. So what about, instead of believing that we're a fact, what if we just notice that? Oops, wrong direction, sorry. What about if we just notice that you're having a thought? The thought that you're not cut out for this. So if you're just thinking along with me, I'm going to take that thought that you're having, and instead of just accepting it as if it's kind of true, I want you to notice that it's actually just a thought. And then I want you to notice how that makes you feel. Because it's not about whether or not your thought is real. It's not about whether or not your thought is true or false. It's about whether it helps you. And by that, it's about how it makes you feel. So if you have thoughts that make you feel stressed, they're not particularly helpful. And if we can just find some distancing in there, then that's going to help you to feel more emotionally resilient. So you don't necessarily have to change that thought. You just need to get some space. How did you find that one, Stacey?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I've had lots of interesting thoughts probably over the past 5 or 6 weeks, and not once did I actually sit down and go, that is not true. Not once. And not once did I think about how it was making me feel. I was just like, oh, you know, maybe I'm not meant to do that, or maybe, and it's, you're always just going, oh, well, that's obviously true, and I'm just going to push it aside and try and move on. And as soon as that slide came up, I was like, well, yeah, they're not facts. That's pretty obvious. But not once did I ever think about that. I think, again, we're probably so busy and we're trying to do a million things, and we just think, look, I'll just push it to the back of my brain and hopefully I'll get past it. And by the time it comes time to thinking about it again, it will no longer be there. But it doesn't mean that I've ever questioned those thoughts that have come up.
Absolutely. And, you know, the problem with thoughts is, you know, if you think about, like, a nice example that I like to use is, you know, sometimes with my husband, you know, I'm married, and, you know, sometimes I'm in a really good mood with him. And when I'm in a good mood with my husband, you know, I want to be married to him forever. I can remember every good thing he's ever done for me. You know, sometimes as well, when I'm in a really, you know, less good mood, so when I'm angry at him, I can't even remember why I married him. I don't know. I can't remember any good things about him at all. All right. And that's because when I'm in a good mood, I'm having some positive emotional states in my body. And so when I'm in a good mood and I'm thinking about my husband, I can remember all the thoughts associated with that really good mood. And they're probably quite helpful thoughts. But then when I'm really angry with him, what happens is those angry feelings actually activate all the thoughts that are linked to those emotional states as well. So then I just get a big flood of memories of all the other times I've been angry and all the things that make me upset. So the reason that's a nice example is think about how we do that at work. So we can be doing really well, having quite neutral and helpful thoughts and thinking, I can do this, I'm really on track, I'm hitting my goals. Then we get stressed, and all of the thoughts that we usually have under stress suddenly flood our mind. And those thoughts are going to be quite negative, and they're probably going to get in our way and mean that we don't actually go ahead and hit our goals properly. And it's just really important to monitor what's going on inside your head for that reason. So it doesn't mean you can change it, but what you're trying to do is not change a thought, it's moderate back down the emotional state. So when you get yourself back to neutral, the thoughts will shut back down all by themselves. And that's the kind of skill that's behind it. Okay. The second thing you can do is you can actually challenge your thoughts. So going back to Mandy, who talked about, you know, just having anxiety and just working through it, just kind of letting it sit there. I would never say to do that with anxiety. So you should always challenge your thoughts. You know, if you're stressed, the first question I usually ask people is, are you catastrophizing? You know, are you just thinking the world's ending? Are you thinking that you're going to go bust from COVID, where in reality it's just going to give you a really hard slap to the face? You know, what's going on here? Is it really as bad as you think? And look, it might be, but the first question is to check that your thinking's okay, because under stress, most of us have catastrophic thoughts, and they're not often helpful. And also, they're not often real. They're just thoughts, and the facts are usually different. So what's the evidence for it?
I think that's a really interesting one, because we have had obviously a lot of clients, and I'm sure everyone on the webinar as well. Our first thought was all of our clients are going to struggle and they're all going to close up, which means we're going to close up and the world's going to end. You know, one thing led to another really, really quickly. And in our minds, it snowballed really quickly what we thought the next potentially 6 months was going to happen. And I was chatting to some people the other day, and they said, oh, actually only 4 of my clients were affected. And I was like, isn't it funny how 4 weeks ago, when we didn't really know what was on the table from the government and how COVID would play out and the social restrictions, we assumed that our business would be no longer. And yet here we are 4 weeks later. Yes, we're probably a little bit more highly strung, but the actual facts are so different to what we initially told ourselves. And I thought that's I never knew that was a word. That's too big of a word for me to even try and say. It's not going to come out like that if I say it. But I never thought that was a thing. I just thought, oh, okay, my brain is telling me that this is a disaster and the potential impact is huge, which it could be, but the truth is it actually wasn't, or it isn't so far. So it's interesting that I've never challenged that. I just thought, well, that was my thought then. Let's hope it doesn't happen. And I kind of parked it. And now we're doing a lot of the analysis. We're like, oh, well, actually, some people are doing really well and some businesses have thrived. I just assumed everyone across the board would be struggling and kind of be in a really bad space. So it's interesting when you say that, because I'm like, why would I challenge that thought? I came up with the thought. Yeah.
It's very true, isn't it? And I think, it speaks to, earlier when you were saying, you're like, what I'm passionate about, like most of my clients are incredibly high functioning. I mean, they're really clever people with huge businesses who are very successful. I mean, there's not that they are not clever at life, but sometimes we weren't taught this stuff in school. And knowing really good practical strategies to think is so important, and it's not something that any of us learn. So I love this stuff. Catastrophic thinking, the reason that humans do it is our brain is just primed up for survival. So if you go outside and there's a big lion outside on the street, like the lion suddenly appears, you're going to experience fear, and because you experience fear, you're going to pay a lot of attention to its teeth and its claws, and then you're going to jump to the worst conclusion in the world, which is that it's going to attack you and you're probably going to die. And that's going to help you to make a really smart decision. Because if you didn't do that, you go outside, you see a lion and you're like, oh, it's so cute. Look at that big cat. And then, you might like look at its tail or its colors and think, oh, its fur looks so soft. And then a second later, you'd actually be dead. So your human brain is ready to do catastrophic thinking at all times. So as soon as you get a rush of fear, you're going to look for the teeth and the claws in any situation. And you need to know that you're going to do it, because that's how you step back and you say, is this a real big lion? Do I need to look at his teeth and claws? Or can I also check out the fur, and can I check out the tail, and can I look to see if there's any good stuff going on here as well? So that helps us to navigate the risk.
And Karen's just posted a really interesting comment about how Facebook or social media in general often adds to that. I can't say the word. No, I'm not even going to try. I'm going to look like an idiot. But people often will put the wrong information up, and I think we then will assume certain things, and so you think you have to do certain things, or certain things are going to happen. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Social media, I've had to start switching it off now, because the amount of messages, questions, comments we get, we simply cannot help everyone. And there's no way any of us could help every single person. But interesting to that, I had someone message me on Instagram on Sunday night telling me the tax office portal was open, and it was like 5:45. I'm getting ready for dinner. And I was like, why does someone think at 5:45 on a Sunday I need to know? But then my instant reaction was, I better jump online and I better start looking what everyone's talking about. And I'm like, no, you just don't need to do that right now. Just stop. That's not important. So yeah, social media, I've had to start kind of switching back on it, because I think it can just consume so much energy that I don't have.
It can. And it's because it stirs up that emotional. I mean, Facebook are very clever, obviously. And, there is designed to stir our emotions. It's a carefully designed platform to stir us emotionally, and then it works. And if people are catastrophizing over Facebook, which they do all of the time, then that's what we see, and then we can buy into it so easily. Let me just click back in the right place. Okay, so what are your options? That would be another thing to ask yourself. So really lovely what you said on Sunday night. What are your options? You could jump online, you could get into the portal, or your other option would be maybe to sit down. I shouldn't say have a glass of wine, but sit down, spend some time with your children, do some really nice self-care, maybe have a bath or something. There's always options. We don't have to rush. And when we just do things because we're in a rush, when we just tend to go with how we feel and then we do the next thing that happens, that's not very emotionally intelligent. So we've always got to have that little pause and consider the options and think about what's a more helpful thought. Okay.
And so, Diane's just agreed that she said the same on Sunday. She goes, what was everyone thinking? I think we were all bombarded on Sunday when the ATO opened and people were messaging us. So I think it's nice to remember that we do have options. I think at the moment we feel that our clients are number one, and I agree that 99% of the time they are, but at 5:45 on a Sunday, my priority was having dinner with my family. So I politely replied to the message saying, thanks, we are back at work tomorrow. And I didn't feel guilty about it. I was like, this is my choice and that's what I'm choosing to do. And then we got slammed on Monday, but I need to be able to take that time out and go, that's not the time that I need to give to someone else.
Yeah, and like I'd agree. And in psychology we often talk about having really healthy boundaries with people, both for the work that we do and then also for the emotional content as well. And I think as we navigate this year with coronavirus, it's really important to think about how we'll maintain those boundaries, particularly in different work roles. When you're dealing with clients who are also upset, when they're also really emotional, and so of course they're quite reactive as well. When you're less reactive, it probably calms them down. When you show that you've got the ability to calm down and wait, and that it's okay to wait until tomorrow, that probably really helps them as well. So that was that tip. Hopefully that's really helpful. I did have one last little tip to give you, so I'll go a little bit faster because I know I've probably kept you guys back from your next thing. But I just want to say, tip one summary was, you can't control what life will throw at you, but you can choose your thinking. It might not feel like you can when you start to work with your thoughts, but you can. And having helpful self-talk is definitely a skill for success in life. All right. My second tip, I'm going to fly through. However, I can fly through it because I know that you probably know this already, because most of you work with figures and you do bookkeeping or accounting and that kind of stuff. And so I already know that you probably do batching and that you think about batching in your day-to-day work. But I want you to think about batching in your day-to-day life and just taking it a step further. So all of the studies, all of the research, all of the science shows that human beings can only actually do one thing at a time. Now, go back to when we talked about trying to homeschool, work from home, make your husband a cup of tea, answer the phone to your clients, manage your own self-care, manage all of those conflicting demands on your attention. And you can see that right now it's a hard time to do one thing at a time. But I want to ask you to do only one thing at a time. So if you want to homeschool your children, then do that. Maybe allocate them 15 minutes out of your hour and actually go and homeschool your children for 15 minutes and then go and do something else. Don't try to sit there for 4 hours and work while you homeschool and try to multitask and do some different things. Because I hear stories of people trying to, make breakfast, get the laundry on, homeschool their child, do their work, juggle everything else, check in on their elderly parents, maybe check in on their husband working next door, walk the dog at the same time. There's just too much going on. You can't possibly do it. So let's just do one thing at a time. Maybe do less of each thing, but only one at a time. So if we can effectively direct our attention to one task, then also the benefit in that is you can't be worrying about other things. So yeah, we are very clever as humans, but our brains are not that great. So we can't be doing more than one thing at a time. So you can't sing along and at the same time do maths. It's not actually possible. If you know the song really well, you might be able to sing and kind of task switch back and forward really, really fast, but it won't be as efficient as if you just sang the song and then did the maths. So doing one thing at a time. I know you guys are good at batching. I want you to batch up your time. It'll help reduce your stress at home. Okay, so be really proactive about your workflow. Think about asking the schools, if you're trying to homeschool, if your children can be online at different times. So if you need to go and be really productive because your children are quite self-motivated at 9 o'clock in the morning and they're just no trouble then, maybe you need to go at 9 o'clock in the morning and get your work done. And in the afternoon, when your kids really need your attention because they're scratchy and they can't do it by themselves anymore, then maybe you need to wrap up your work and go do some homeschooling with them in the afternoon. And if that means that they don't do all the work in the morning that they're supposed to do for school, I think that's okay. Just let the teacher know that that's what's happening in your home and ask them to support you. So be in charge of what you can control. You might not be able to control whether they're home or not, but you can choose to control what's going on while they're at home and how much it's taking away from your day. Okay. And that's really it. That was all I wanted to say. If you do want to work on those kind of skills around brain training, a lot of it comes from the mindfulness camp. I'll do heaps of mindfulness training. So if you do want to go and learn some stuff, you don't have to learn it off me, but to give you an idea, if you want to go and learn mindfulness, look at all the benefits it will give you. I use mindfulness as a huge tool to navigate stress. I'm also a cancer survivor, and mindfulness is the way that I survived through a cancer diagnosis and my treatment and my recovery and my ongoing anxiety about whether it will come back. So mindfulness is a really good tool to help you just to get better at everything. Mindfulness just has good side effects like increased self-awareness, increased life satisfaction, and increased ability to manage stress. There's heaps of training programs. You can jump online and find me. I do lots of online training, and we do lots for like anxiety boot camps and how to survive COVID. So we do lots of things for your team as well. Stacey will have my details, and you can look me up if you like. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for listening to me. If you've got other questions, I'm happy to stick around for another 5 minutes. You know, my big fat hairy goal, as they say, is to make people's lives better by teaching them how to be emotionally well. And I hope that you'll take away a skill that you'll use today and make sure that you take charge of your emotional well-being, because this is going to be a long year for all of us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amanda. I think in the accounting and bookkeeping space, especially at the moment, we are not prioritizing ourselves, and I will openly put my hand up to say I'm probably first in the queue of not looking after myself. I'm working crazy hours. I have ordered takeaway far too many times. Although this week I did make a conscious decision and I ordered HelloFresh to get food delivered, because I said I just need to take one extra thing off my plate. And it's good food, the kids eat it, and it comes with instructions so my husband can cook, who is definitely not a cook. So I strongly encourage everyone, if there's just one thing they can take away from today, well, there's probably two big things for me, is that the thoughts that you think are not facts. I thought that was so obvious when I read it and when I saw it. But the things that we do say to ourselves at times are not nice, and we do say things to ourselves which are definitely not true. So think back to that, and also think of how you can lessen the load. So whether that's batching tasks, whether that's outsourcing a certain aspect, and just releasing some of that pressure on yourselves to get all of it done in a day. I had a conversation with my children's teachers and I said, we will do our best, but it will not be everything that you allocate to us. And that is our decision. And the teachers were fine about it. We're doing bits and pieces here and there, but I am not going to do 6 hours a day with 2 children on my own plus run a business. So I made the conscious decision we would do the best that we possibly can over the next homeschooling period. And whatever we do in that period will be fine for everyone involved. So I hope everyone has enjoyed today. Thank you so much for coming on. I have put Amanda's website up in the page. It's also on our Facebook page when I advertised the website. So if you have any questions or any concerns about your own mental health or your ability to cope now or in the future, I strongly encourage you to reach out to a professional, whether that's Amanda or someone else in your close community, as your GP, etc. But please know that you're not alone. Some of the things that you're feeling at the moment are quite normal, but we obviously want to make sure that if you do need some help, there are some options out there. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to chatting you or seeing you once COVID is over and we can attend a conference or at least catch up for a drink or a meal. So thanks very much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Stacey.